Hey everybody, sorry we're just a couple of minutes late. I was actually attending a luncheon for an organization that my wife is on the board of. It's called Pace Center for Girls. She's on the board of directors for the Pinellas County location. Phenomenal organization. Organization is designed to help young girls, typically elementary through high school, that are in difficult situations, including abusive situations, and help them get out of those situations, give them mentorship and a place to live, education, and help them recover and become, just good, normal, everyday people. Matter of fact, the keynote speaker today was a young woman who speaks all over the country now. She's an honorary member of the chapter. She was stabbed 32 times by her fiance and just grew up knowing nothing but violence in her home. And she is now a thriving member of our society. And then we also featured a young 15-year-old girl whose name was Suni, and her mom was a very abusive person, and she told her story. There probably wasn't a dry eye in the crowd, but long story short, her dad was able to rescue her out of that situation, get her into the Pace Center, one of the Pace Centers here in Pinellas County, and she is now back thriving. Her grades are great. She's doing great in school, and is just budding and blooming as a young woman. So thanks for taking that moment. Let me talk to you a little bit about Pace. But if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you'll actually see some of the pictures, as well as check the Facebook. But what we've been doing is, in our leadership, this is part 4 of what is leadership. It's more than management. And part 4 is where we're going to begin talking about high-performing team building. But before we go into high-performing team building, I just wanted to do a quick review of where we have been. And we started out talking about the difference between leadership and managers. Managers simply follow a process or enforce a process and take measurements and make sure that the process is running correctly. At least a good manager will do that. A leader, however, is someone who actually inspires the people to follow them. And to be a true leader or a great leader, those followers cannot be coerced. They have to be voluntary followers, which means as a leader, you have to understand how to motivate them to the point where they would work for your goals to fulfill the team goals in a way that it's not because they're doing it just for a paycheck or to avoid some negative consequence. They're doing it because they want to be there. They're actually motivated followers. And we learned as a part of that, to become that kind of a leader, there are different levels of leadership maturity. And the leadership level of maturity in which someone becomes a team builder is an achiever. That achiever level focuses on team building and is outward focused. Prior to that level, there's a level called the level of expert. Now, the majority, or about half of all leaders in corporate America today, are in the expert mode. They gain their position of authority because they're an expert in their field. However, just because they're an expert in their field does not make them a good leader. It does bring them to one of the middle levels of leadership maturity, but being an expert in your field doesn't mean that you're a good leader. Matter of fact, typically when you're on the expert level, you're inward focused. It's you want to be seen as the expert. You want to be seen as always right. You're very perfectionist oriented, and you expect those around you to be the same, but you put pressure typically on yourself to always have the right answer, and you leave very little team building room, or room for team building in your the group that you lead. So moving on to a higher level of achiever, that's when team building begins, and then the next level up from that is becoming an individual or individualistic, meaning that you don't really seek the approval of others. Therefore, you can begin to think more out of the box, think creatively, and bring innovation to your organization because you're not afraid to challenge the status quo. And then another the leadership level above that is called the strategist, which, and again, at the strategist level, you're creating overall strategies for the business and hopefully for more than one division. But I did want to review just one point, and that is to reiterate, there should not be a single vice president in leadership or a leadership position that is not at a minimum at the achiever level. And that is something that you're going to hear me over and over say that in these videos, that if you are not at the team building level, then you really have no place in being a vice president, unless that vice presidency is literally over a scientific expertise area. But even then, at a vice president level, you should be driving and leading a team, possibly a division, and that requires team building skills. With that said, as you can kind of see behind me, we wanted to talk a little bit about, authenticity in leadership. Because authenticity in leadership is something that is a foundational stone to team building. You've just got to be authentic with your team. I've worked with a lot of people who were in leadership positions, and they didn't even want to associate with the people that were on their teams outside of the office. It just made no sense, because one of the things that's a characteristic of a high-performing team is they do things outside of the office together on a frequent basis. So if you're watching this, especially if you're one of the people that I have worked for in the past, that didn't want to associate or talk about your personal life or do things outside of the work environment with your team, you're one of those folks who is not yet developed to the achiever level, and there's something that's in your skill set that is holding you back from being highly successful. Because to be a true high-performance team builder, you're going to spend time outside of the office with your team. You're going to be authentic with them. You're going to be honest with them. And I would just tell you right now, speaking from experience, one of the things that damages a leader's or a manager's ability to lead and build a high-performing team is having their team members catch them in I just no other way to say it but lying. Just that when you catch them lying, when you catch them saying one thing to one person and maybe saying something to the other, or just fabricating in situations, or the worst one is, two worst ones, taking credit for your team's work as if you did it yourself, or the other one is simply also not giving credit or honoring your team members for their performance. So those are just a few things to look out for. Maybe you can identify yourself where you might be at and go, yeah, I kind of do those things. Maybe I'm not as a mature leader as I thought I was, but that's okay, because we all have to mature past that stage of opportunist and the diplomat, which what I described, a lack of authenticity is typically on the lower levels of leadership maturity, and that's more of an opportunist, or what's called the diplomat level. But back to our authenticity, people follow authentic people. You know, people know it when you're real with them. When you're real with someone, there's an emotional connection that happens. And if you know anything about giving presentations, such as like Talk with Ted, love the book, or Talk Like Ted, love the book, you should get it and read it. Making an emotional connection is the most important part of giving a presentation or leadership, because people are emotionally, when people get emotionally invested in a team or a goal, that is when they begin to feel ownership of that goal, of that, in that team. They begin to feel like an accepted member of the team, and they will work much, much harder for that team to be a success when there's that emotional connection, because they're now become invested and have a feeling of ownership in regard to completing the goals and fulfilling the goals of the team. So in high-performing team building, there are typically 4 stages of the team. And those 4 stages are forming, storming, forming, storming, norming, and performing. And each one of these 4 stages has dynamics that are incredibly important to learn as a leader and in team building. And the forming stage is pretty simple. This is when you're picking your team and you're making sure that, as we talked about in the last segment, that you're getting the right people in the right seats on the bus. And I'm going to flip back to an earlier slide, and this is where something like the Foresight creative personality assessor or thinking assessment comes in. The Foresight creative thinking model was developed by a professor at Buffalo State University, which is the original creative problem-solving university. Everything creative problem-solving, creative thinking, all of those theories started and came out of Buffalo State University. And what they've done is they've actually created 4 main categories of how people think and the role that they can play on a team. So if you can see behind me, you have one that's called a clarifier, one that's called an ideator, one that's called a developer, and one that's called an implementer. And all 4 of those roles are incredibly important to have on your team. And one of the reasons why taking this assessment or having, let's say in the hiring process, you have your candidates take this assessment, is that you can identify where they fall in the team. And if you only have a team of, let's say, 5 people, if you've got 4 clarifiers and 1 ideator, and you've got nobody to develop the solutions or develop the business, and you have no one that can actually go out and implement what's been developed, in other words, like customer support, whatever that might be on your team, then you're going to be hamstrung and you're just not going to be able to build a high-performing team. So understanding or even getting certified in the Foresight creative thinking model is an incredibly, incredibly important thing to do. This is actually something that IBM and some of the world's leading organizations use in their team building activities. I have a good friend that is one of the facilitators for this, and it just so happens that the professor who created this is one of the key professors of the doctoral program, which I'm a part of, which has obviously been a great experience for me. But what you're looking at on the back is actually my scores. And you look at that, just a reminder of, it's like, well, hold on, that's kind of interesting. You're kind of even keel all the way across. And that's true. I'm actually what's called an integrator, which an integrator is a person that functions in all 4 of these areas and is the perfect type of a personality or a creative thinker that drives the process. This means this really goes along with my leadership maturity level, because when I was on earlier levels of my leadership maturity levels, I spiked much higher in one of these areas. And as I've matured as a leader, I've actually evened out in the way that I think. And so you can progress and mature in the way that you think creatively. And so as a strategist level of maturity, you can see that mine are very equal, and I can sit back, take all four areas in, and then strategize on how the team should go forward and give them direction on how to succeed. So that's just one example, or a couple of examples of how you might use a Foresight model to evaluate your people. There's a couple other tools that I would use as well in regards to getting in the formation process of getting the right people in the right seat. And we'll talk about those next time. Today we're just going to kind of do an overview of the 4 stages. So, and one thing I did want to remember is Briggs-Myers or Myers-Briggs personality test, don't use it. It's debunked. Remember, it was created in the 1960s for white middle-class Americans, and bottom line is, it's just not relevant for today. And you can kind of see the book behind me by Professor Merv Emery from Oxford University that has written and shown from an academic standpoint why Myers-Briggs is just something that's really we shouldn't trust in today's more modern, diverse society. So, to the storming stage. And I tell you, I was just involved with a nonprofit organization, and I had to present these 4 stages to them because their leadership is struggling to progress past where they're at. And one of the reasons is that the leadership in this nonprofit organization doesn't understand that conflict is good or can be good. Matter of fact, conflict can be a very positive energy generator to push teams forward if you know how to handle it correctly. The problem with most managers or most people that are trying to build teams is they haven't been trained and they don't understand what's called conflict resolution. Matter of fact, there's a couple of books that I always had my team members read. And the first one was called Crucial Confrontations. And in Crucial Confrontations, that book, matter of fact, both of these books were written by world-renowned negotiators and professors. One from, forgive me, I wanted to say Harvard Business School, but that's not correct. It's one of the other Ivy League's business schools. But anyway, it's called Crucial Confrontations. And what it does is it helps people that are not comfortable with confrontation, first off, understand that confrontation and conflict is actually good. Having personal boundaries, being able to have your own voice, being able to stand up for what you believe, and not being able to be just pushed around or just a yes person, yes boss, yes whatever you want, but to actually understand how to contribute positively to a team, even though it may create some conflict. And I had a boss, actually my last corporate boss, who did not understand this at all. And unfortunately, this gentleman who is more on the diplomat opportunist level of maturity resorted to screaming and yelling. Matter of fact, there was another marketplace vice president that preceded him that did the same thing, and he was always yelling. And when I was younger in my leadership maturity, before I started my PhD, I just assumed, well, I guess regional vice presidents and market vice presidents have the freedom to scream at people, and that's okay. And since I've gone on in my leadership studies and in my doctoral pursuits, I've found out that the reason why they screamed and yelled at people is as simply as, one, they were on a lower level of leadership maturity, and two, they did not understand conflict resolution. They did not understand how high-performing teams form, and they didn't understand that storming is a normal part of high-performance team building. And what happened was that in one situation, one of the gentlemen unfortunately, had to be asked to leave the company. The other one, every single person that the person hired failed. And the only people that actually succeeded were those that he inherited that were already working with the company and were already high-performing leaders. And that just kind of goes to show that you can be in a regional vice president position because you're a very good salesperson and interview well, and yet be hired in and have a low level of leadership maturity and not understand how to build high-performing teams. But that's why we're doing this series, is we want to help change that. So in the storming phase, this is where people kind of find out where they fit in the team. Yes, in the forming stage, you pick out your teammates very carefully for their skill sets and put them in certain roles. But this is really in the storming stage, they found their boundaries and they find their voice on the team. And for teams that can turn conflict into something that generates positive energy to move forward, they go on to what's called the norming stage. And in the norming stage, what happens is this is where the teams begin to build like their own little mini society. And so they build, just like in society we have norms, this is where they begin to have norms. It could be on Fridays at 1, we have team meetings. At Monday morning at 9 o'clock, we have a weekly launch meeting. We have maybe what are our high performance activities? What are our key payoff indicators and our key payoff activities? What are our communication norms? Do we do web meetings? I've managed remote teams for 20 years and have been around conference type meeting software for almost as long. I mean, all the way back when you literally had this huge camera in the room and everybody sat around a board table and talked, and there was just one camera, someone else. This was prior to everyone having a notebook or a laptop or a phone where they could actually log on remotely. So all of those things that are typically what you may say daily activities, all of the norms that surround that. So for instance, if you travel, right? A norm typically would be if you travel 75% and you fly out Tuesday morning or Monday night, and you work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, fly home Thursday evening, right? Most people that travel and are trusted, they're going to work from a home office on Monday and Friday. It's abnormal for a company to require a traveling employee then to come in on Monday morning and Friday morning when they travel that much. And if you're in a situation where that's the case, and you're feeling burnt out or that you're not trusted, and then you're right. The company that you're working for, that norm is abnormal. If you are traveling 75%, and you're home 1 week a month, that week that you're home the whole week, that week you might expect to be in the office. But on a Monday and a Friday, you should be working from home. So those are the kind of norms that we're talking about. And they've got to work for the whole team. If they don't work for the whole team, and that's not something that is mutually negotiated through that storming process, mutually negotiated and what's called a decision by consensus, your norms are not going to work well, and there's going to be people on your team that are going to be unhappy. And when they're unhappy, they're not going to perform to their highest degree, and therefore you are building a barrier to your own performance as a leader, because you are literally putting norms in place that are unpleasant and even demoralizing sometimes to your teams as they function. So look out for those, and make sure that when you do build a team, that your team and you're building norms by consensus. So consensus brings us to the next level, and teams after they norm, and it might take several months for a team to norm a new team, go on to begin to perform. And in the performance phase, this is where, in my book, actually, I talk about the last chapter or two chapters. I talk about it's called leadership for growth or automatic growth. And there's something that are called autopoietic systems that you can build into your team that just once it's kind of set it and forget it. Once you turn the process on, the team just runs, and everyone is in the right seat. Everyone understands where they fit in the team after that storming phase. Everyone understands the norming, how you're supposed to function and how you do function. And once you put all those into place, if you've done it in a way that will perpetuate the activities, everybody's doing their daily high payoff activities. Everybody's keeping up with their KPIs. Everyone is, firing on all cylinders, and you're making sure that the people that work for you, that their human needs are being met. Like on Maslow's hierarchy, right? There are a set of human needs that if we meet them at work, it's proven that the teams perform better than if we don't meet those. It's called positive people management. That's another series that we'll be doing, or supportive management. But going on onto that performing piece, those autopoietic systems are something that you literally just set them up, and it's like building a car engine or an automobile, and you turn it on, and it just runs. And from a leadership standpoint, this is the best thing that could ever happen to you, because once your team is up and running, the hard part of your job is done. And so I'll take an example from friends of mine that have taught me this process over the years, and I want to share this without sounding arrogant. But so I have a friend who worked, and this is one of my mentors, and they worked on average about 25 hours a week. But their teams, after they set up their teams actually functioned at such a high level that they were always number one or number two in the country. Meanwhile, if you compared my friend to his counterpart that did not understand what we're discussing right now, did not understand the 4 stages, and did not understand the performing stage, or how to set up automatic or autopoietic systems within their team. My friend's peers, and there were 4 or 5 of them in this situation, traveled Monday through Friday, many times 4 weeks out of the month, worked 60, 70 hours a week, and yet struggled to meet their quotas, and struggled to build their teams because they didn't understand these things, and they're working long and hard hours simply because they didn't understand what we're talking about, what's called autopoietic systems. That's why I recommend, please go out to Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, whatever, grab my book, you can get it in hardcover now, and learn those last 2 chapters that talk about leadership for growth. Because I found myself in the same situation throughout my career. Not only have I been known for taking over underperforming teams and bringing business revitalization to them and making them high-performing teams, and I've done that for 20 years. But I've also been known for working fewer hours than all of my contemporaries, yet outperforming them on the job. And I would just say that in my last role, I typically never worked more than 32 hours a week after I got my team up and running. And on Fridays, you know, I was forced to come into the office, even though I traveled and worked remote. And I told you it's highly demoralizing to do that. And by noon, I was done. Why? Because on Fridays, I'm doing my reports. I'm doing my expense reports, my travel reports. I'm doing my calendars. I'm setting up my stuff. And by noon on Friday, man, I'm done. I'm completely done. And my teams are outperforming every team except for one or two in the country at one point. Meanwhile, my peers are working and traveling Monday through Friday, and they get home, they spend Saturday with their family. Maybe they go to church on Sunday and relax on Sunday, and then Sunday night, they're working again. They're doing their expense reports and all of their admin work on Sunday nights. And I'm thinking to myself, if only you would learn the secrets of autopoietic systems, if only you would listen and understand how to build high-performing teams, you can probably get 20 quality hours of your life back. And this segments a little bit into your work-life balance and your quality of life. And when we talk about forming, storming, norming, and performing, we've got to talk about intergenerational leadership skills, which is the topic of my dissertation, and there's a lot of that. Matter of fact, the book centers on that. Millennials and some of the younger generations, and even a lot of Gen Xers who are getting a clue, they will not put up with work hours in stressful work situations that cost them their quality of life. And one of the things that will help your team members, and if you're a vice president, a senior vice president, or you're a CEO watching this segment of our leadership training, this is how you create an environment within your organization that extends tenure, raises employee morale, and keeps high-performing talent inside your organization instead of them migrating to another organization because you burnt them out. And if I could appeal to you, if you're in that realm and have the authority to be able to bring me in to teach this, this is one of the most impactful things that I've learned in my career and seen as a change agent over my 30 plus years in business. That if you can teach your leaders how to build high performing teams and build what are called autopoietic automated growth systems into their teams, you will help your employees get hours and hours, literally 10, 20 hours a week back that they can spend with quality time with their families, with their spouses, making sure that they're rested up. It's been proven that an employee who has good mental health and is rested and comes back to work on Monday, rested and fresh mentally, performs and is more effective and more efficient than people who are driven and just worn out or burn out. So a last minute appeal, because we're going to end here on this point on performing, that it is, again, one of the most important and one of the greatest things that you can do for your organization is to teach your managers and anyone who is leading a team on how to build those autopoietic, or these 4 stages, but how to build those autopoietic, automated growth, automated running features into their teams, and their teams will flourish, and you will have a much, much happier, much more productive, efficient, effective, and a staff with a much, much better work-life balance. And we all know that attrition is something that costs and employee disengagement. You know, one of the reasons why employees get disengaged is because they're burnt out. And we covered the 6 main reasons high performers leave, and all of what we're talking about would help alleviate that. But how much does it cost a company to retrain a new employee? And how much does it cost a company in growth or continued business when one of their high performers leaves? It's millions and millions of dollars. And today, disengaged workers are costing American corporations between $450 and $650 billion a year. And that's just something that we need to change as leaders in corporate America and in the government as well. Don't forget those figures include government workers too. So I appreciate you being on the broadcast today. If you were watching it on a recording, thanks again for taking the time to watch the whole recording. And we'll do part 5, and we'll dig in a little deeper into each one of these 4 stages so that you'll have specific skills. We'll do 4 sessions, 1 on forming, 1 on storming, 1 on norming, and 1 on performing. And then maybe the final one, the 6th one we'll do on the automatic systems, so that you can understand a little bit more about what I'm talking about. But thanks again for joining. Greg Bushman, signing off.